Earlier this year, I made a video addressing Ted and Robin's relationship with the firm belief that whilst they did have their romantic entanglements, looking at how said relationship played out and the events afterwards, it was pretty clear, to me at least, that Ted and Robin weren't actually friends. Not in the true sense of the word, anyway, and not in the way in which their relationship was portrayed on the show. And even before that, prior to that, I'd made yet another video where I talked about how the McLaren Five are actually split into two groups. You have the inner core that is made up of Marshall, Lily, and Ted, and then you have Barney and Robin rotating on the outside of the group, not really a part of the core. They felt more disposable to me, like they were hanger ons that were mostly tolerated in the case of Barney, and a bit closer, but still on the outside looking in the case of Robin. Now, when I made that video, I was still operating under the assumption that at least the core McLaren Five, namely Ted, Lily, and Marshall, were at the very least true friends in the sense of the word. And then the front porch episode happened, and I had to reconsider everything because when you have so much narcissism operating within a friend group, can they really be considered friends? Now, before I get into all of that, if this is your first time on my channel or your first time stumbling upon this particular series of mine, hello, I'm Noria, and welcome to my How I Met Your Mother video series, where I'm currently documenting my first time ever watch of the show while sharing my thoughts as I go along in a stream of consciousness style analysis where I talk about these characters and their choices, try to analyze their behavior, and make guesses about how events might play off in the future based off of my thoughts on how the story is progressing and what I learn about these characters with every new episode I watch. As such, I would like to reiterate that this really is my first time watching the show, and I've so far been able to stay away from all discussions as it pertains to How I Met Your Mother and its characters. So, what you are in fact getting really is a blind reaction of a series that finished airing years ago. And from what I've been able to gather, you all have enjoyed watching me taking this show and the characters as I guess my way in the dark about how things might play out or have played out. And as such, I would like to ask that you please continue to abstain from dropping any spoilers in the comments. I appreciate the work you all have put in so far in keeping things spoiler free for me. Thank you. If you do want to say something that addresses a point I made, but which veers into spoiler territory, just give the spoilers ahead warning followed by a bunch of asterisks so I don't accidentally get spoiled while scrolling by, and so I can ignore that particular comment whilst other subscribers or non-subscribers who are watching the video can interact with your comment and you all can chat about how right or wrong I am and what I successfully noticed or what sailed over my head. And for those who are keeping track, I've currently watched up to How I Met Your Mother season 4, episode 17. Plus, if this is your first time stumbling on one of these videos, kindly know that I do have a format where I split the video into three parts: the intro, the synopsis, and then finally my thoughts. As such, I have included timestamps to help you navigate the video as you so choose. But before I get into the synopsis part of the video, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been pretty instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Sherry, Kat, Lena, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. Now, with all that said and done, How I Met Your Mother, season 4, episode 17, titled The Front Porch, picks things up from where we left it in the last episode, which I am still going to call the Karen episode instead of its official sorry, bro, in that Ted and Karen are full on dating to the dismay and discontent of his friends because Karen might be older and in her 30s now, but she's still a grade A douche in Marshall's words. And none of his friends like her, nor can they understand Ted's obsession with her. Although, to be fair, Lily and Marshall try to point out that all of this is because of the fact that she's the first girl Ted fell in love with and had sex with, which I had a record scratch moment with, because I could have sworn when Ted was telling us about his first time, just like the rest of the McLarens did, Ted had mentioned his high school classmate who basically kicked him out when they were done, although he tried to play it off as the reverse being the case. And I'm fairly certain that said classmate was not Karen. So, continuity issue. But anyway, whilst they were all trying to wrap their head around Ted's interest in Karen, the rest of the gang is also trying to wrap their heads around Robin's new job and the ungodly hour that her show airs, when Robin tries to psych herself up that she's sure some people watch her show and even points out that the gang probably has seen a couple of episodes, their reaction immediately clue her into the fact that they most certainly were not staying awake till 4 a.m. in the crackers middle of the night to watch her talk about whatever she does on her program. Seeing her sad appearance, Marshall and Lily promise that they will get the gang together in their apartment, set an alarm, and make sure that they watch Robin's next episode together. Robin is happy to hear this, and this is the moment when Ted shows up to inform everyone that Karen had broken up with him. News that delights all his friends. When they press him for further information, he reveals that Karen had discovered Robin's earring in Ted's bed and was convinced that Ted was cheating on her with Robin, even amidst Ted's denials. An ironic situation when you consider that Karen is the cheater in their relationship, at least their past ones. Anyway, the rest of the team is pleased that Karen is now out of their lives for good, and then they head over to Marshall and Lily's apartment to watch Robin's show, where everyone gets comfortable. Marshall dons a shirt dress for its comfort, whilst Barney dons a suit jammers, complete with a tie, which baffles Marshall, who values comfort and ease over all else. And no matter how much Barney tries to mock him, Marshall doesn't budge. Instead, he wonders why Barney chooses to sleep in his suit jammers in the first place, to which Barney tells him it's so that just in case, hot women show up in front of his apartment one night, they will see him all put together and suited up and swoon. Clearly, Barney is a dumbass. Marshall therefore decides to give Barney a taste of the shirt dress experience, a situation that immediately converts Barney, who is won over by how easy and breezy and non restrictive the shirt dress is as an item of clothing, something that is infinitely better than his suit jammers. Of course, what this ends up meaning for Barney is that when he is back in his apartment one night, and by some stroke of luck, a hot woman does indeed show up in the middle of the night to see him. She sees him in his nightdress, is utterly unimpressed, and walks away to Barney's horror. But aside of Barney and Marshall's shenanigans, even more things go down in Marshall and Lily's apartment, because whilst everyone was waiting for Robin's show to start within the next 30 minutes, Ted enters Marshall and Lily's bedroom and spots the other half of Robin's earrings on the dresser. He immediately comes out, puts the television on mute, and accuses Marshall of having sabotaged his relationship with Karen. Marshall denies having done so, but Ted doesn't believe him, and things continue to escalate until Lily confesses that she is the one who sabotaged Ted and Karen's relationship, and she did so because Karen failed the front porch test, which saw Lily imagining the future with her, Marshall, and Ted's much older retirement age selves, where Karen is still a biatch whose vibes doesn't vibe well with the rest of their group. And so she made the unilateral decision to sabotage Ted's relationship, which is quite in line with her usual MO. And she finally admits to Ted that his relationship with Karen isn't the first that she sabotaged. In fact, she sabotaged 6 of his relationships so far. A matter of fact, Robin was one of said sabotaged relationships. Now, speaking of Robin, whilst all of this was happening, she was having quite the morning on her show, what with her co-anchor turned chef catching fire and Robin jumping to the rescue to quench said flames, after which she resuscitated him before he was taken to the hospital. And afterwards, she was the sole person on air who had to deliver the baby of one of her guests on the program when said guest suddenly went into labor. All in all, it was quite the experience. And when Robin enters the apartment, she's excited that her friends haven't caught all of it, only to be hit with the double whammy that was being informed that not only did her friends not watch her show, but also Lily had sabotaged her and Ted's relationship by basically putting the words in their heads that led to the argument that that they had about Robin potentially wanting to move to Argentina, which in turn led to their breakup. And the reason why Lily did all of this was because of the front porch test, where in the future she saw Ted still resentful about Robin not wanting kids and Robin being resentful that she had put her career on hold for Ted. Ted at this point is utterly upset about Lily's actions and walks away. And a guilty Lily afterwards reaches out to Karen to tell her the truth and hands her a note to give Ted. Karen reunites with Ted and gives him the note, and he reads it to see Lily's apology as well as her saying she had cooked him an apology dinner for him and Karen to enjoy up in his apartment. Karen at this point gives the ultimatum demanding that Ted ends his friendship with Lily, and that's the final straw that breaks the camel's back as Ted breaks up with her. What this ends up meaning is that he shares Lily's dinner with Robin instead, and as they chat and reminisce about what could have been, they make a pact to marry each other if by the time they turn 40, they are both still single, something that I know will come back and bite these two idiots in the ass. The end. Like I stated at the start of the video, my firm belief has always been that Ted and Robin's relationship was more exes who are now on friendly terms than them being actual friends, because the show really didn't take the time to flesh out said friendship in a way that lends an air of believability to it. Hell, I still am of the opinion that Lily has been more of a friend to Robin than Ted has been. Hell, Marshall has been more of a friend to Robin. I finally got around to watching the episode where he tried to give her a little bit of home by first taking her to Little Minnesota in a New York bar and then took her to a Canadian bar afterwards. And yes, I do like the bit of their friendship that we've gotten to see. Hell, Barney has been more of a friend to Robin than Ted has been. And before anyone comes from me, please consider that when her ex showed up and she regressed to her 16-year-old self, after which he dumped her, after she had helped promote his stupid band song on the station's airways, Barney was the one who offered her comfort and the end. And she was, when she was truly vulnerable, and she was vulnerable in that moment. Like, sure, it ended with them having sex, but before that, it was the only one that she actually let herself shed tears over a jackass ex in his presence. And I'm still not getting over the fact that he made her a video resume, mailed it to every single station he could think of, and even went as far as helping her negotiate a salary. That was brilliant. That is what a friend would do. But back to Ted. Whilst I didn't really see his relationship with Robin as them truly being friends, and sometimes his interaction with Barney is more geared around him tolerating Barney for entertainment and self-serving purposes, I'd always worked with the assumption that he and Lily and Marshall were solid, good friends, the best really, until he finds the earring on top of the bedroom dresser and immediately loses it. Now, do I think that Ted is justified for being angry at the thought that his friends could have sabotaged his relationship with Karen, even though I am firmly in their camp that Karen ain't shit? Yes. If you missed it, do check out last week's video where I point out just how much of a role Karen has played in Ted becoming who he is within the story, and his desperation to find love amidst his almost non-existent self-respect or self-pride. So yes, I can understand why Ted is angry. However, I am still of the opinion that Ted immediately turning to accuse Marshall of being the saboteur says a lot about the state of their friendship that had me questioning it in the first place. Like, if truly we are to buy the narrative, the sales pitch, if you will, that Marshall and Ted have been pushing since the start of the very episode of season one, whereby we are meant to read them as being best friends, I don't know, maybe outrightly accusing your best friend of having betrayed you and your trust with no proof except for the earring, and then refusing to believe said best friend when they tell you that they are innocent says a lot about the state of said friendship and the lack of trust therein. And trust me, I will come around to Lily because God's the narcissism of this woman and the show's insistent need to have her be right at the end of the day by the gods. But back to Ted and Marshall, it says a lot that even after Marshall insisted on his innocence, Ted refused to believe him. Marshall was pointing out that there are valid reasons for why Robin's earrings could possibly have been in his home that isn't just a case of him choosing to sabotage Ted's relationship with Karen. But Ted refuses to budge. And all I thought at that moment was, Theodore Evelyn Mosby. In what universe, in what context, in what way has Marshall Erickson ever actually full on lied to you about something this important, this big? Is there really no way you, who considers yourself Marshall's best friend and vice versa, is there no way for which you can give him, I don't know, the benefit of the doubt? I don't know about you, but in that moment, I was so incensed on Marshall's behalf because the Marshall that we've gotten to see so far in the show, the one that Ted has claimed as his best friend since they were 18, that's over a decade at this point, he isn't the type of person who lies easily. Hell, we can say of the entire friend group, the one with the worst poker face when it comes to lying is Marshall Erickson. And as his supposed best friend, Ted should have known better. Ted should have, I don't know, trusted Marshall when he told him straight up that he did not take the earring, nor is it the one who ruined Ted's relationship with Karen. The most he's done has been to verbally express his disdain for Karen, primarily because, like Marshall said, she's a douche, and also because she's a douche who brings out the worst in his best friend, i.e., Ted loses all his self respect and also turns into a pretentious twat when she's in his orbit. Those are pretty valid concerns, and just because Marshall had expressed them, Ted took that to mean and believe the absolute worst of Marshall. And I don't know about you, but that's not really something you do to your friends, especially not your best friend. And before anybody drops the comment that, oh, but you know, mistakes happen and Ted was caught up in the moment, I will say, yes, I agree with that. Like I said earlier, I think his rage and him being upset at possibly being manipulated is a valid response. My issue is that after the truth came out and he realized who the real saboteur was, he did not apologize to Marshall. Like, I kept waiting with bated breath. Just for something, an acknowledgement of the fact that he thought the absolute worst of Marshall in the moment, and he was wrong for doing so because Marshall was innocent and Marshall believed deserved better, and he should have believed his best friend was telling him the truth and wouldn't lie to him about that. But Ted does not say anything. The narrative instead swings over to Lily and focuses extensively on her shitty behavior without acknowledging Ted's shitty behavior that had just occurred prior. People make mistakes. We hurt our friends unwittingly sometimes. That is just human behavior. What we do afterwards is what matters, how we try to make up for said behavior. And whilst Lily tries in the episode to make things up with Ted, Ted doesn't do the same for Marshall, which had me reevaluating his claim of being best friends with Marshall. Because I don't know, if you're going to be that incensed about your best friend not looking out for you and instead trying to sabotage your relationship, I think the code, the friendship code, at least expects you to man up and admit that you fucked up. You accused him wrongly. We did not get diddly squat. And now it's occurring to me that it's the little slights that Ted sends his friends' way, especially with Barney, Robin occasionally, and now Marshall. The show, which to be fair is being told from Ted's perspective, never really has Ted acknowledge the little moments where he was being a dick to his friends. It would not have cost him shit to apologize, and I stand by this. But now let's move on to the character that made me wanting to yank my hair out with her audacity in this episode, Lily Aldrin. Quick side note. Do we know if she takes on Marshall's last name or does she keep hers or does she hyphenate? Because I don't really think the show has outrightly confirmed that yet so far. Or if they did and I missed it in a previous episode, please let me know in the comments. But yes, back to the audacity and narcissism of Lily, because like I stated in the Aldrin Justice episode, when Lily bulldozed her way through Ted's concerns with regards how he wants to handle his relationship with his abusive piece of shit boss, and Lily decided to teach Ted boss a lesson like she would in class, even though this is the real world and not her classroom, and she can't and shouldn't be treating adults like kindergartners. We already could see from the episode that Lily is a character who always believes that she is in the right and knows best, and that her actions are always justified because to her, that is the right way to do things. I already mentioned whilst I was addressing that episode that a big problem for me is that narratively speaking, the show always tries to end in a way that has Lily justified in her actions. The stunt she pulled in Aldrin's Justice, for example, is what gave Ted the backbone he needed to put himself forward, and he was able to make a pitch to the client that saw his firm get the account, and he became the supervisor, the project supervisor on said business. We were meant to walk away from that episode with the implied understanding understanding that Lily ultimately was right. And the same can be said to apply to the front porch as well. Ted is understandably infuriated when Lily admits to being the one who had sabotaged his relationship with Karen because Karen failed the front porch test. Now, the first time I heard the front porch test, I was thinking maybe it had to do with how, for example, Karen was introduced to the friend group. Maybe she said something on their first meet that Lily immediately took as a failure of the front porch test. After all, metaphorically speaking, the front porch of the home is where you meet guests for the first time before you invite them in, and it's often where first impressions are made. So I was working with the assumption that that is what she meant, that the first impression was really terrible. Imagine my surprise when the front porch test is nothing but a figment of Lily's damn imagination, whereby she utterly envisions an ongoing bridge game in their old age, and she tries to figure out what Karen's personality slash behavior would be at said time. I say tries to figure out because this is important to note. Lily believes that she is all knowing to the point that she doesn't think that anybody, especially Karen, would have had any sort of growth or change within the next 4 decades of her life. Like, let that sink in. Lily Aldrin projected Karen's present behavior into the future with the assumption that there will be no change or growth in Karen in the space of 4 decades. And I don't know about you, but that read as some narcissistic shit because Lily has convinced herself that she's such a perfect judge of character that she knows slash can tell if someone has the capacity for change. And in her world, Karen does not. Hell, in her world, Robin does not either. Because would you look at that? Karen was not the only girlfriend of Ted whose relationship with him Lily had sabotaged. She did it to Angie as well back when they were in college, to the sci-fi girl that Ted had had a connection with. And she did it to Robin as well, because still in that damn front porch test, Lily is convinced that 4 decades into the future, Robin would still not want any kids and Ted would resent her for her choice. Now, do I agree that if 70-year-old Robin still didn't want kids, Ted would have resented her for that choice? Yes, because ultimately Ted wants children. He wants to be a father. And that has always been the bone of contention between him and Robin since they met his parents back at the start of season 2 in the brunch episode. And we were able to clearly see that neither Robin nor Ted were a good match for each other since they both wanted different things. But that is them in their late 20s entering their early 30s. Lily making the assumption that in the next 4 decades of their life, Robin would still not want any kids. Is Lily deciding that she has the ability and the wherewithal to play God? And that is peak narcissism at its finest. Lily Aldrin is audacious. But you know who's even more audacious than us? The goddamn show. Because ultimately, after Ted walks away utterly furious about Lily's betrayal, Lily tries to make it up to him by admitting the truth to Karen and making them both a romantic dinner in Ted's apartment, only for Karen to be utterly autocratic in her response by demanding that Ted end his friendship with Lily, which by extension would also mean ending his friendship with Marshall. That is when Ted finally gains the backbone to break up with Karen, which is great for Ted. I wish he had made that decision for himself and not just because Karen had pushed him to the wall and tried to force him into choosing between her and his friends. But hey, a win is a win and I'm going to take it. But back to the audacity of this damn show. The fact that after all of that, they made sure that, yes, even though Lily apologized and all of that, she was still ultimately right in her decision because Karen really isn't it. And Ted broke up with her. Like, the show didn't give any hints prior to that, that Karen was utterly displeased with Ted's friend group. She was just as dismissive of them as she's always been. Her forcing that ultimatum was yet another way in which How I Met Your Mother wanted to tap its nose at its audience and show us that Lily's way might not have been ideal, but she was right in her call after all. And I don't know, it doesn't really help her God complex when the writing at every turn tries to support inane actions, does it? And still on the front porch, I can't be the only person who wondered why, oh, why Barney wasn't on the front porch, nor was Robin. No, Robin only showed up in said front porch as a romantic interest, not as a part of their friend group. And honestly, I do think that that is the most honest this show has been with regards to dynamics within the McLaren Five. The core group is always going to be Marshall, Lily, and Ted, who are on the front porch, the ones represented in it, and Barney and Robin just exist outside of their group, which is why they aren't with them, featured with them in their old age, except for when Robin is present as Ted's non suitable future wife. This show just tells on itself. Plus, I am still team Robin deserved better than this group of absolute idiots that she calls her friends. But who in this episode did not act like her friends? The plan was for them to watch her show just once, and we see on screen that she was crying as she held up a photo frame of all of them, confirming that she was talking about and hyping up and gassing up her friends on her show because she assumed that they would keep their promise to her and watch her show. They did not. Robin was secondary to Ted losing his shit, focusing on his drama and his sabotage relationship, as secondary to Marshall and Barney, who in that moment were more caught up in the freedom of the dress shirt. And the fact that the episode was one of the most entertaining that she'd ever done. I mean, her co-anchor caught fire. She saved him and resuscitated him, and she delivered the baby of her guest right on air, all of which were huge for her. And you could see it in her eyes when she entered the apartment, initially happy that her friends caught all that glory moment and saw her shine on her program, only for said eyes to dim when she realized that yet again, she wasn't considered important enough and none of them watched her. The worst was how dismissive they were about not having seen her. And so she had to downplay everything to manage her own disappointment. And I don't know about you, but that was so sad to watch. And just friends, true friends, don't act that way, shouldn't act that way. Hell, they didn't even TiVo it. When you can't even count on your friends to root for you or to be your biggest cheerleaders, are they really your friends when you really think about it? But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.